When their first serious fight was over, Keisha and Marcus fell into agonizing thoughts. Like a broken clock, their lives stopped at the moment when they both realized that something had gone wrong. These were no longer just minor misunderstandings that could be swept under the carpet like old dust. Now they faced a real threat, the destruction of what they had built with such difficulty. Keisha, sitting in the bedroom with the door closed, felt like she was trapped in her own life. She has always been distinguished by the desire for order, for clarity in everything from work to relationships. But now her inner world turned upside down. She felt disappointed and tired. The love that had seemed indestructible was now under threat, and all she could do was sit and replay in her head every moment of their quarrel, every word said or not said. Marcus wasn't in the best condition either. He stayed on the couch in the living room. His eyes were glued to the TV, but his thoughts were wandering somewhere far away. They hadn't fought like that in a long time. Yes, minor quarrels, discontents, it was all like any couple, but not like that. This quarrel, like a lightning strike, split them into two parts. Keisha's voice sounded in his head, her words hitting his ego and pride. He replayed over and over the moment when she said she didn't want to live like this anymore, that her loneliness had become unbearable. Marcus couldn't help but admit that she was right. He became too involved in his work, his career, leaving their relationship somewhere in the background of his life. It seemed to him that everything was going according to plan. He was making money, building a career, and therefore Keisha would be happy. But he was wrong. His ambitions, which had seemed so important to him before, now looked small compared to what he could lose.
Why should I put up with this?
She whispered to herself as she lay on the bed. Her eyes were fixed on the ceiling, as if there was an answer to all her questions.
Is this the life we dreamed of? When did it all become like this?
She closed her eyes, trying to remember the days when everything was simpler. They were young, in love, and it seemed to her that the whole world lay at their feet. They dreamed, made plans for the future, laughed at trifles and believed that together they could cope with anything. But now everything seemed somehow faded, as if reality had washed away the colors of their relationship. Instead of carefree conversations about the future, they talked only about what was wrong, and every conversation turned into a clash. Marcus was sitting on the couch, his head was down, and his hands were clutching the TV remote control, although he had not looked at the screen for a long time. His thoughts went back to the evening when they first had a serious conversation about their feelings. Keisha then confessed to him that she feels lonely, despite the fact that they live under the same roof. He didn't think much of it at the time, writing off her words as fatigue and stress from work. But now it was clear he was just ignoring the problem.
"I'm an idiot," he said under his breath. "How could I miss it? I can see how hard it is for her. Why didn't I stop and talk to her like I used to?"
He got up from the sofa and went to the window. A quiet night street stretched behind the glass. The whole world seemed to be asleep except for him. He stared at the dim light of the lanterns, but Keisha's words were spinning in his head. She said that she could no longer tolerate his constant delays at work, that she lacked attention and warmth. But how could he fix it? After all, his work was an important part of their lives. He wanted them to live in prosperity so that she could be proud of him. But thinking about it, Marcus realized that the problem was not how much money he was making or what success he was achieving at work. The problem was that he had forgotten about her, about their life together, about the fact that they were a team. Work occupied all his time and thoughts, and he stopped noticing her needs. Meanwhile, Keisha couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness. She had always believed that love was more than just being there for her. She wanted to be heard, understood. But every day she felt that Marcus was getting further away from her. Their conversations turned into an exchange of short phrases. Her dreams of living together, of having children, of building their future together, seemed so far away and illusory now. She went to the window and looked at the stars. As a child, she often wondered, looking at the night sky, made wishes, believed that her future would be bright and happy. But now she couldn't understand how things had become so complicated. Keisha didn't believe in fairy tales anymore, but she desperately wanted to believe that her story with Marcus wasn't over yet. It's been a few days since their fight. They both remained silent, avoiding conversation. The whole house was filled with a silence that was becoming unbearable. Both Keisha and Marcus understood that this could not go on for long, but neither of them dared to take the first step. One evening, when Keisha returned from work, Marcus was sitting at the kitchen table, staring into space. He looked up as she entered, and their eyes met. They stared at each other for a moment, not knowing what to say. There was tension in the air, but at that moment Marcus felt that if he didn't say anything now, they could completely lose each other.
Keisha, we need to talk.
Her heart sank, but she knew this conversation was inevitable. She nodded silently and sat down opposite him. There was silence in the room, but not the silence they were already used to, but a silence in which an important moment was brewing.
I understand that I screwed up a lot. I can see that you feel bad. But I do not know how to fix it. I'm really trying, but he paused, not knowing how to continue.
Keisha looked at him and her eyes softened. She could see that he was genuinely trying to understand her. But she also knew that desire alone was not enough.
I don't want you to fix everything alone. I just want you to be there for me. I don't need your decisions or excuses. I need your attention, your participation. We're not talking anymore, Marcus. Have you noticed?
Marcus nodded, knowing she was right.
I know, I didn't know that I had started everything like that. It seemed to me that I was doing everything right. A job, a career, it's important. I wanted us to have a future.
What about the real one? Have you ever thought about it? The future is not something that will happen by itself. It needs to be built here and now. You got so carried away with your work that you forgot about us, about our relationship. I don't need more money. I need you to be with me. We're a team, aren't we?
These words sounded to Marcus like a blow to the very heart. He never thought about the fact that his desire for success could cause the destruction of their relationship. It seemed to him that it was all for the sake of both of them, for the sake of their future. But now he saw that all this had led to them becoming strangers.
You're right. I got too carried away with my work and completely forgot about you, about us. I didn't want it to happen like this.
Keisha lowered her head, her hands nervously twisting the edge of her sleeve. She felt that this conversation was important. Yong was for both of them, but at the same time she didn't know how to fix what had already been destroyed.
Marcus, I don't want to live in such silence anymore. It's killing me. I feel like we're losing each other, and it's scary. But I do not know how we can return to what was before.
Marcus stared at her, feeling like he was losing her. And that was the worst thing for him. He realized that their relationship was not something that was taken for granted. This is something that needs to be worked on every day, no matter how corny it may sound.
I don't want to lose you. I'm ready to work on it. We'll do it, Keisha, I promise.
Their conversation ended, but this time the silence was different. Now it was the silence not of despair, but of hope. After their first serious conversation, in which Marcus and Keisha laid out all the accumulated resentments and worries, it seemed that the ice between them began to crack. But to say one thing and to do it is quite another. Both understood that one conversation would not solve all their problems. But this conversation was the very first step that they had been putting off for so long. Now they had to move from words to actions. Marcus knew that things wouldn't change overnight. He has always been a man who is used to solving problems quickly, reducing everything to simple tasks, whether it's a job or a relationship. But this time he realized that he would not be able to solve this issue the way he was used to. Their relationship has become more complicated than ever. Keisha was right, he had really forgotten about them, immersed in his career. But how can they return to the intimacy they have lost? How to become not only husband and wife again, but also a team? Keisha was also in a state of internal struggle. She wanted to believe that their relationship could be saved, but part of her was full of doubts. It was hard for her to forget about the pain she had been experiencing all these months. Yes, Marcus promised that everything would change, that he would devote more time to their marriage. But will he actually be able to change his habits? Or is this another promise that will disappear into thin air, like many others? A week has passed since their conversation. A week full of strained calm. Marcus really tried. He came home from work earlier than usual, cooked dinner, or at least helped Keisha around the house. He tried to communicate with her more, to ask questions about her work, to be interested in her project. But every time he tried to make contact, it was like there was an invisible wall between them. Keisha answered his questions, but her answers were short, as if she was afraid to get involved in a deep conversation again, which could ruin everything.
Thanks for dinner. Day.
She put her fork down on her plate, trying not to look at Marcus.
It was delicious.
I'm glad you liked it.
His voice was soft, but he couldn't help but notice the coldness in her tone.
I tried my best. Mace,
She nodded, not knowing what else to say. There was an awkward silence in the room. Marcus could feel his own insecurity growing. He is not used to such situations where emotional subtlety decides everything, not logic and facts. Usually in life, he just acted if something didn't work. He changed his approach. But here it was different.
Keisha,
He finally began, after a long silence.
I know that just coming home early is not the solution. But I want to show you that I'm ready to change. I'm ready to be here for us, not just for work.
I can see that you're trying, Marcus.
She replied, finally looking up at him.
But it's not just about coming early. I feel like we've lost something important. I used to be able to talk to you about everything. And now I'm afraid that if we start talking, everything will fall apart again.
Marcus felt his heart tighten at her words. He knew she was right. During these months, he had become so deeply involved in his own affairs that he had simply forgotten about her feelings. And now his task was not just to spend time, but to regain the trust that they had lost.
I understand what you're talking about.
He got up from the table and went to the window, trying to collect his thoughts.
I'm scared too. It's scary that we won't be able to get back what we had anymore. But Keisha, if we don't try, we'll definitely lose it. And I don't want that.
She stared at him, feeling her doubts eating away at her from the inside. Marcus's words sounded sincere, but her fear of possible failure was so great that she didn't know if she should open up again. Her heart couldn't take another disappointment.
I just don't want to relive what happened before.
Her voice was low, but there was deep pain in it.
I'm so tired, Marcus. I'm tired of waiting for things to get better. I'm tired of hoping that you'll finally notice how I feel. I don't want to go through this again.
Marcus returned to the table and sat down across from her. He took her hand, feeling her tremble.
I realize that I missed a lot. And I realize that my words don't mean anything right now unless they are followed by action. But Keisha, I really want things to change. I want to get back what we had. And I'm ready to work on it.
She looked at his hand resting on her palm. Her mind was resisting, but her heart was telling a different story. She still loved him, despite the pain, despite all the disappointments, and she wanted to believe that they could handle it. But this fear, it was so great.
I do not know if I can trust you again.
These words sounded like a confession of one's own weakness. She never thought that their relationship would reach a point where trust would become a question that needed to be answered. But she understood that without it, they would not be able to move on.
I know.
He squeezed her hand tighter.
I will prove it to you every day. I don't expect you to forgive me for everything right away, but if you give me a chance, I will do everything so that you can trust me again.
Keisha looked into his eyes, and at that moment her fears began to ease a little. She saw a determination in him that she hadn't noticed before. Perhaps he really realized how much he had offended her. And maybe this time will be different. She nodded slowly, as if giving him this chance, although deep down she still doubted. The next few days were an ordeal for them. Marcus did his best to show Keisha that he had changed. He tried not only to be physically present, but also to be emotionally close. For the first time in a long time, he began to be interested in her life, her feelings, her thoughts. He asked questions about her work, about her project, which she had been preparing for so long, but still did not dare to start.
How are things going with your foundation? Have you decided when you're going to start?
Keisha was surprised by his interest. He had never shown much attention to her charity work before, considering it something secondary. But now his question sounded sincere, and she felt that he really wanted to hear her answer.
I'm still thinking about it. I need more time to prepare. This is a serious step, and I don't want to take it hastily.
Marcus nodded, realizing that this was really important to her.
I am sure that you will succeed. You've always been the best at what you do.
These words brought a smile to Keisha that she hadn't felt in a long time. She suddenly realized that she missed such moments when he said nice things to her, when he supported her, when she felt that he was there, not only physically, but also emotionally. It was like a breath of fresh air after a long immersion in routine and loneliness. But despite all this, they both knew that this was only the beginning of the journey. Marcus tried, but he still had to learn not to fall back into old habits. Work still took up most of his time and energy, and it was difficult for him to keep a balance between his career and family life. Every day was a new challenge for both of them. One evening, as they were sitting in the living room after dinner, Keisha felt that this was the right moment for a deeper conversation. It was important for her to discuss their future with Marcus, not only the nearest, but also more distant. She wanted to know that they had a common plan, common goals.
Marcus, I've been wanting to talk to you about our future for a long time. What do you think about what's going to happen next?
He was a little confused by her question. His thoughts were always focused on the present, on solving problems here and now. But he realized that Keisha was thinking deeper.
I didn't think about it that far. I'm more focused on fixing our present. But I understand that you need to know what awaits us next.
She nodded, waiting for him to continue.
I want us to have a future where we both will be happy, where you can do your foundation and I can do my job, but at the same time we will be together, supporting each other. I don't want work to become a barrier between us again. I want to learn how to find a balance so that we can build our relationship further.
These words gave Keisha some comfort. She could see that Marcus was serious about his intentions. And although they had a long way to go, she began to believe that they could walk it together. A few more weeks have passed. Marcus continued to work on himself, and although sometimes he plunged back into work with his head, he always returned to what was really important to him, their relationship. Keisha, in turn, began to open up to him more and more, not being afraid to talk about her feelings and needs. She realized that honesty and openness are the only way to restore trust. They began planning their future together, discussing how they would support each other in professional and personal endeavors. Keisha devoted more and more time to her foundation, and Marcus was happy to help her with whatever he could. Together, they gradually rebuilt the bridges that they had once destroyed with their ambitions and misunderstandings. These were only the first steps, but they became a guarantee that their relationship could be revived. After the first tentative steps towards reconciliation, which began with discussing their feelings and trying to devote more time to each other, Marcus and Keisha began to gradually restore the lost threads of communication. However, their further journey was not easy. Despite the efforts of both to regain their former intimacy, they faced new challenges. There was so much tension and misunderstanding in their relationship that the desire to fix everything was not enough. Marcus, who is used to solving problems rationally, is faced with the fact that not everything in their relationship lends itself to logic and analysis. He was always sure that if you make an effort and build a plan, you can fix any situation. But the relationship with Keisha required a different approach. He had to learn to really listen to her and be emotionally involved in their dialogues. It was not an easy process for Marcus, who was used to hiding his emotions and focusing on external successes rather than internal problems. Keisha, for her part, was still feeling the effects of her disappointment. Her years of waiting for attention, when she felt forgotten and unwanted, left a deep mark. Even with the apparent improvement in their relationship, it was difficult for her to fully trust Marcus. She continued to live with the inner fear that all their recent efforts were a temporary phenomenon that would disappear as soon as Marcus went back to work or faced another crisis in the professional field. Returning to the dialogue between them required mutual work on themselves. Keisha tried to overcome her closed state and learn to speak openly about her emotions again, despite the fear of being misunderstood or rejected. She had to remind herself that dialogue is not only an exchange of opinions, but also a manifestation of vulnerability, which she avoided after their breakup. Previously, she preferred to keep quiet and hope that Marcus would figure out what she needed. But this approach had led them to a dead end, and she could no longer afford such tactics. One of the main difficulties was that both understood how difficult it was to speak frankly, without returning to accusations and claims. Each of them felt to some extent like a victim of circumstances. Keisha suffered from loneliness and misunderstanding, and Marcus from the pressure and expectations that were placed on him. However, they both knew that in order for their relationship to work again, they would have to speak openly, but without attacks, and with understanding of each other. This new stage in their communication began with a discussion of everyday details. Marcus tried to pay more attention not only to big issues, like their plans for the future, but also to those details that previously seemed insignificant to him. He began to be interested in her thoughts about everyday things, how her day went, what news was in her project, what she was facing at work. It became important to be able to ask questions not for the sake of a tick, but with a sincere interest in her life. Keisha, for her part, was learning not to take his interest as a duty. She was trying to trust what Marcus really wanted to know about her life, and not just doing her marital duty. Their conversations began to slowly turn from an exchange of facts into real conversations, where both could share not only the events of the day, but also their experiences, thoughts, and plans. The old silence in their house, when each of them withdrew into himself, gradually gave way to a more lively interaction. At first, such conversations were rare, but they increasingly found time to have a heart-to-heart conversation. This did not mean that they immediately became an ideal couple, but every step towards dialogue strengthened their trust in each other. Keisha, inspired by Marcus's support, began to devote more and more time to her charity foundation project. Previously, she had been held back by doubts about her own abilities and the fear that Marcus would not support her initiative. Now that their relationship had begun to recover, she felt confident that she could realize her dreams. Her work with charity had always brought her deep satisfaction, and now she could share her plans with her husband without feeling that her ambitions were just her business. Marcus, in turn, tried to support her and not interfere in her decisions, which was a new task for him. Nevertheless, despite their efforts, the old habits still reminded them of themselves. There were days when Marcus, tired after work, would withdraw into himself again and did not find time to communicate. This was alarming for Keisha, who was beginning to worry that everything was going back to normal. She fought the temptation to make claims right away, trying instead to find a way to talk calmly and discuss what was bothering her. At such moments, they both faced a challenge how to stay open with each other, despite fatigue, disagreements, or discontent. Every time one of them shut down, the other felt fear of repeating the past. But they both tried not to get offended, but to talk about their feelings, albeit through force. It was a difficult process that required patience and mutual respect. Over time, their dialogues became more and more profound. They began to discuss not only their daily affairs, but also those things that previously seemed too difficult or painful to discuss. Keisha shared with Marcus her fears about their marriage, as well as her professional ambitions. She told him about how she had doubted herself and her abilities for a long time, how she was afraid that her project would turn out to be a failure, and how she felt a lack of support from him. These confessions were an important step for her, as she had previously been afraid of appearing weak and dependent. Marcus, in turn, began to talk about his own doubts and fears, which he had been hiding until now. He shared how much he felt the pressure at work, how he was afraid that if he did not constantly prove his professional worth, he would lose the respect of colleagues and superiors. He admitted that he sometimes felt like a failure, despite all his achievements, and that this was what made him so deeply immersed in his work. These revelations brought them closer together. Keisha realized that Marcus was suffering too, just expressing his feelings in a different way. Over time, they began to understand each other better. Marcus realized that his work was important, but should not take up all his attention if it threatened their relationship. Keisha realized that she needed not only to expect support from Marcus, but also to learn to support him in difficult moments herself. Their relationship began to be based on mutual trust and understanding, rather than expectations and claims. However, the path to restoring dialogue has been long and thorny. There were times when it seemed easier for both of them to return to their usual patterns of behavior, but each time they tried to remind themselves that they had already gone too far to ruin everything again. They both knew that there was still a lot of work ahead, but every step towards open communication gave them the strength to move on. The return to dialogue became the most important stage in their life together. Now they not only talked to each other, but also listened, heard, and understood. It was a slow process, but every step in that direction helped them get closer. After Marcus and Keisha began to return the dialogue to their relationship, they realized that this was not enough. They both knew that in order for their marriage to reach a new level, real actions, compromises, and changes in daily life were required. Mutual concessions were the next step on their way to restoring their lost intimacy. From the very beginning, Keisha felt that her personal boundaries were often violated due to Marcus' chaotic lifestyle. She was used to order and organization, and his disorder and unwillingness to pay attention to small things annoyed her from the very beginning. Now, after numerous conversations, she began to understand that it is necessary to accept a partner with all his characteristics without requiring him to fully meet his expectations. That didn't mean she had to silently put up with the mess, But Keisha realized that you can't expect an instantaneous change in a person. She began to learn to be more tolerant, realizing that his habits were not a sign of disrespect, but simply part of his character. On the other hand, Marcus understood that in order to make Keisha happy, he would have to work harder on himself. It had never been easy for him to keep order and keep track of the little things, but now he realized that it was important to her. Gradually, he began to pay more attention to what previously seemed unimportant to him. He tried not to throw things around, wash dishes on time, and help around the house. It was a difficult step for Marcus because his schedule at work was still stressful, but he concluded for himself that the comfort of home and the atmosphere were part of their shared happiness. And now he sincerely wanted Keisha to feel comfortable in their home. The concessions concerned not only domestic issues. Keisha, who was used to being a leader in organizing her work time and personal space, began to realize that she could not control everything in their relationship. She had to realize that Marcus also had his own priorities and his own life, and she could not demand that he completely obey her rules. This was an important discovery for her, to let go of some of the control and let him be himself, without expecting constant ideal behavior. She used to often take his mistakes and missteps as personal grievances, but now she began to understand that it was not worth taking everything personally. Marcus was undergoing his own internal changes. There was always a race for success in his career, and he was sure that it was normal to devote most of his time to work in order to ensure a better future for himself and Keisha. However, now he began to realize that the future might never come if he did not pay attention to the present. This was a difficult realization for a person accustomed to measuring career success by achievements and money. But now Marcus realized that his true happiness does not depend on success at work, but on his relationship with Keisha. He had to learn how to find a balance between career and family life, which required him to give up some of his ambitions and reevaluate his priorities. For Keisha, for her part, it was important to learn how to let go of the little things. Her perfectionism often prevented her from seeing the positive aspects of their life together. The constant struggle for order and perfect organization of life made her miss moments of joy and intimacy, which were much more important. She realized that sometimes it's better to close your eyes to the mess and just enjoy time together with Marcus than trying to fix every little thing. These changes in her perception allowed her to feel more relaxed and open to new opportunities in their relationship. One of the main concessions Marcus had to make was about his job. He realized that his pursuit of career achievements was distancing him from Keisha, and that he needed to learn how to limit his time devoted to work. It was not an easy step, because his career success was an important part of his identity. But for the sake of their marriage, he decided to give up constant overwork, late calls, and endless work tasks in order to spend more time with his wife. It wasn't an easy decision for him, but Marcus realized that success in his personal life is much more important than winning a career. Keisha, in turn, has made an important decision regarding her expectations. She realized that her dreams of a perfect marriage with a perfect life were an illusion, and that the reality was constant work on the relationship. She had to admit that both Marcus and she were ordinary people with their flaws, and that their marriage would never be perfect. Instead of waiting for Marcus to become the perfect husband, Keisha began to appreciate his efforts and sincere attempts to improve their relationship. This gave her a sense of gratitude and allowed her to be more flexible in her expectations. The mutual concessions also concerned the time they spent together. They both used to live in their own rhythm. Marcus was absorbed in his work, and Keisha was absorbed in her projects. But now they have started to consciously set aside time to be together. They agreed that they would have dinner together several times a week, without being distracted by phones and work. These simple moments of rapprochement helped them regain their lost intimacy. They started watching movies together, walking in the evenings, and discussing their plans for the future. These were small steps, but each of them filled their relationship with new meaning. One of the main achievements in their concessions was the decision to support each other in personal endeavors. Marcus, who had previously believed that his career was the most important thing, now sincerely supported Keisha in her desire to develop her own charitable foundation. He not only supported her morally, but also actively helped her with advice and ideas, using his knowledge and experience in business. This became an important moment in their relationship, because Keisha now felt that her efforts and ambitions were important to Marcus, and that she was not alone in her aspirations. Keisha also took a step forward. She no longer saw Marcus's career as a threat to their relationship. Now that he was trying to find a balance between work and family life, she realized how important his professional realization was to him. Instead of fighting his ambitions, she began to support him. This did not mean that she no longer put her interests first, but now she understood that their success as a couple depended on the ability to support each other in different areas of life. This stage of the relationship has become a key one for Marcus and Keisha. He demanded that both of them give up some of their habits and expectations in order to create new rules for living together that would meet the needs of both. Concessions were not easy, but they realized that this was the only way to save their marriage and make it stronger. Mutual respect for each other's interests and needs became the basis for their new relationship. Now Marcus and Keisha could look at their future with more confidence. They knew that their relationship would not be perfect, but they understood that each of them was ready to make concessions for the sake of common happiness. This process has become an important lesson for them, no matter how difficult it can be in a relationship. If both partners are willing to work on themselves and support each other, anything is possible. Thus, the concessions they made for each other became the basis for creating a more harmonious relationship. Their marriage was far from ideal, but now they knew that they could overcome any difficulties if they worked together. After Marcus and Keisha began to make mutual concessions and find a balance between their differences, their relationship began to gradually recover. However, as with any process of change, the result was not instantaneous. Both understood that there was still a lot of work ahead and improvements would not happen immediately. But the small steps they started to take turned out to be decisive. The daily efforts they made to maintain their relationship became the basis for further progress. It all started with little things that at first glance seemed insignificant, but over time turned out to be important in the process of their rapprochement. These small actions became a part of their daily lives and helped create a new reality in which their relationship was filled with meaning and joy again. The first step was a conscious decision to spend more time together. Previously, Marcus and Keisha each lived in their own world. He immersed himself in work, she in her activities. Their evenings together were rare, and communication was limited to discussing everyday issues or a brief exchange of news. Now they began to find time to really be together. It didn't mean drastic changes or big gestures. The intention itself was more important to pay attention to each other. They agreed that they would have dinners together several times a week. It was a simple solution, but it turned out to be surprisingly effective. Joint dinners became moments when they could talk calmly, discuss their business, share thoughts and feelings. These evenings gradually became a tradition that they began to appreciate. Keisha cooked her favorite dishes, and Marcus increasingly took on the role of an assistant, helping in the kitchen. It created a sense of comfort and harmony that had been lost for so long. Another important step was that they started spending more time outdoors. Walking in the park, which used to seem like something insignificant, has now become a way to get closer and escape from the daily hustle and bustle. During these walks, they discussed not only current affairs, but also their dreams and plans for the future. It was a time when they could be alone, without distractions, and it helped them understand each other better. The walks became a symbol of their renewed communication, simple but sincere. Marcus also realized that he needed to take more care of the everyday little things. Previously, he believed that his main task was to ensure their future by focusing on their careers. Now he realized that it was important to show his love and care not only through financial stability, but also through attention to Keisha, her needs and desires. He began to listen to her more, to take an interest in her affairs. When she talked about her work or ideas for a charitable foundation, Marcus showed real interest, asked questions, and gave advice. This helped Keisha feel that her ambitions and aspirations were important to him, that he sincerely supported her endeavors. Keisha, in turn, also began to change her attitude to small things. Her perfectionism often prevented her from enjoying life and caused disappointment if something did not go according to plan. Now she tried to be more flexible, realizing that ideal conditions are not always achievable, and that it is not so much the pursuit of perfection that is important, as the opportunity to be happy here and now. She learned not to dwell on minor misunderstandings and inconsistencies with her expectations, but instead to accept the moments as they are. This allowed her to be more relaxed and open in order to enjoy life with Marcus. One of the key steps they took to improve their relationship was to realize the need to pay attention not only to their own needs, but also to each other's interests. Marcus, who used to think that work and career were his top priorities, began to see that Keisha needed his support and involvement. Her charity foundation project had become an important part of her life, and he sincerely wanted to be a part of this process to support her dreams. Keisha, in turn, realized that she also needed to support Marcus more in his career aspirations. She used to see his work as something that kept them apart, but now she realized that his professional achievements were an important part of his personality. She became more interested in his projects, tried to be attentive and involved when he talked about his successes or difficulties at work. This helped them both feel that their ambitions and goals did not destroy their relationship, but on the contrary could become the basis for mutual support. An important step towards improving the relationship was also the realization that in marriage it is important to find time for yourself to restore internal resources. Previously, both Marcus and Keisha often forgot that personal pastime is not a luxury, but a necessity for maintaining harmony. Now they have begun to encourage each other to spend time apart, doing things that bring joy and relaxation. Keisha resumed her hobby. She started practicing yoga and drawing again, which helped her relax and feel more balanced. Marcus, in turn, began to find time to exercise and read books that interested him. This gave them both a sense of renewal and allowed them to return to the relationship with new energy and a fresh look. Another important step was to improve their emotional connection through more open and honest communication. Now that they were both ready to talk about their feelings and needs, they began to understand each other better. It wasn't easy, as both had to overcome their fears and insecurities related to vulnerability. Marcus, who used to restrain his emotions and hide his feelings, began to share his thoughts and feelings with Keisha more. This allowed her to see him from a new perspective, not as always a strong and successful person, but as a person who can also experience fears and doubts. Keisha, in turn, began to talk about her fears and frustrations, which she had been hiding for a long time. She realized that Marcus couldn't read her mind, and if she wanted their relationship to be strong, she needed to talk about her needs and expectations. These conversations became the basis for a new level of trust between them. Now they both knew that they could turn to each other not only in moments of joy, but also when they were experiencing difficulties. The small steps they began to take concerned not only the emotional sphere, but also physical intimacy. During their separation, their intimate relationship also suffered, and now they have begun to rebuild this important part of their marriage. The restoration of physical intimacy became a natural continuation of their work on emotional connection. They started spending more time together, enjoying simple things like hugs or hand walks. These moments of intimacy helped them feel connected to each other again and build trust. Every step they took strengthened their relationship and helped them return to the harmony that had been lost. However, it was a process that required patience and constant work. Marcus and Keisha understood that there would be mistakes and new challenges along the way, but they also realized that now they have a common goal to preserve and strengthen their relationship. The small steps they started to take became part of their daily lives and reminded them that even the biggest changes start with the little things. Over time, they began to feel that their marriage was once again becoming a source of joy and support, rather than stress and frustration. This feeling gave them confidence that they were on the right track. The small steps they took helped them understand that love is not always grand gestures, but daily efforts aimed at making each other's lives better. Now they both knew that the main thing was not to wait for instant results, but to keep going forward, even when obstacles arise in the way. After a long journey full of difficulties, compromises and small victories, Marcus and Keisha gradually came to a new stage in their relationship. This period was for them not only the result of many months of work, but also the beginning of a new chapter in their life together. They went through a crisis that could have destroyed their marriage, but thanks to mutual support, patience and willingness to work on themselves, they not only preserved their relationship, but also made it stronger. The new chapter of their marriage was full of realizations and changes. They no longer aspired to the illusory ideal that had seemed so desirable before. Instead, they have learned to accept each other for who they are, with all the flaws and imperfections. Their journey has taught them that an ideal relationship is not the absence of conflicts and disagreements, but the ability to work together to solve them. They realize that the main thing in marriage is not to avoid problems, but to learn to cope with them together. One of the key changes in their new lives was how they felt about their roles in the relationship. Previously, each of them had their own expectations, which often did not coincide with reality. Keisha wanted to see Marcus as the perfect partner who would always be attentive, caring and ready to share her feelings with her. Marcus, in turn, aspired to be a successful and reliable husband, ensuring their future at the expense of their careers. These expectations proved to be the cause of many disappointments, as none of them could match the idealized images. Now they have both accepted the fact that the ideal is unattainable, and that they are both imperfect. Marcus realized that his work is an important part of his life, but not his whole life. He no longer sought to constantly reach new heights by sacrificing personal happiness. Now he has learned to find a balance between career and relationships, paying attention to both professional growth and his marriage. This gave him the opportunity to feel more balanced and satisfied, as well as strengthen his relationship with Keisha. Keisha, in turn, learned to let go of her expectations and stop demanding from Marcus what he couldn't give her. She realized that her happiness did not depend on how closely her husband matched her ideals. Instead, she began to appreciate what they have here and now. Keisha was no longer striving for perfection. She was learning to enjoy the moments both good and difficult. This allowed her to feel the inner freedom and harmony that had previously been lost in the pursuit of the ideal. A new chapter in their lives was also marked by the fact that they began to actively plan their future together. If earlier their plans were scattered and each of them focused on their own ambitions, now they have become partners not only in marriage, but also in life. This concerned not only their professional and personal goals, but also their joint plans. They began discussing how they would develop together, what steps they would take to strengthen their family, and how they would support each other in difficult moments. Keisha and Marcus, as a couple, have become more aware of their actions. They began to create new traditions and rituals that help them keep in touch. One of these traditions was their regular trips outside the city. These trips allowed them to disconnect from everyday worries and focus on each other. They planned their trips together, chose the places they wanted to visit, and discussed what they would do during their travels. These moments became an opportunity for them to escape from the routine and enjoy each other's company without pressure and fuss. In addition to traveling, they also began to spend more time studying together at home. If earlier their evenings together often took place in silence when everyone was doing their own business, now they tried to find time to do something together. It could be simple things: cooking dinner, watching movies, reading books that both found interesting. They began to discuss what they had read more, share their thoughts and impressions, which helped them to better understand each other and deepen their bond. The new chapter of their lives also included working to maintain emotional intimacy. If in the past they often hid their real feelings for fear of appearing vulnerable or unnecessary, now they have become more open in their conversations. Both realize that trust is the foundation of their marriage, and that they must constantly work to strengthen it. Marcus has learned to talk more about his experiences and fears, which used to be difficult for him. He realized that Keisha is not just his wife, but also his partner, whom he can trust and share his feelings. Keisha, in turn, stopped being afraid to express her emotions. She no longer expected Marcus to figure out what was bothering her. Now she talked about her needs and desires openly, without fear of being misunderstood. This change helped both of them to understand each other better and avoid many conflicts that previously arose due to understatement and misunderstanding. In addition, their new phase of the relationship included the realization that personal space and time for oneself is an important part of a healthy marriage. They both realized that in order to maintain harmony in a relationship, you also need to find time for yourself to regain strength and maintain internal balance. Keisha began to engage more in her personal hobbies and projects, feeling no guilt for taking time for herself. Marcus also began to appreciate his moments of solitude, which helped him better cope with the stress at work. This realization allowed them to avoid many conflicts that had previously arisen due to the fact that they were too dependent on each other. Now they both felt freer in their marriage, realizing that supporting each other did not mean giving up personal interests and needs. This gave their relationship a new degree of freedom and depth. An important moment in their new life was also the acceptance of the fact that not all problems can be solved instantly. They learned not to panic when faced with difficulties, but instead to calmly discuss how to handle the situation. This allowed them to feel more confident in their abilities and not give in to emotions in moments of crisis. Instead of falling into despair or blaming each other, they began to look for compromises and joint solutions. A new chapter in their lives was also connected with the fact that they began to make plans for the future, not only in terms of career and personal achievements, but also in terms of starting a family. Now they were discussing how they see their future in a few years, what goals they set for themselves as a couple, and how they would support each other in these endeavors. Marcus and Keisha began to plan more global things, not only professional successes, but also the possible expansion of their family, travel, new projects that they could implement together. They also began to think more about how they could support each other in personal achievements. Keisha, who was actively involved in her charity project, felt that Marcus had now become her real partner in this business. He not only supported her morally, but also helped with advice, shared his experience, and even offered his help in implementing some aspects of her foundation. This gave Keisha confidence that she was not alone in her aspirations, and that her husband really cared about her success. Marcus, in turn, felt that his efforts at work and in his personal life had become more balanced. He no longer felt the constant pressure of having to reach new heights in his career, because he realized that his personal happiness did not depend solely on professional success. Instead, he found satisfaction in being able to support Keisha and make joint plans with her for the future. The new chapter of their lives was full of realizations that relationships require constant work and attention. They no longer expected everything to be perfect, but now they knew how to deal with difficulties and support each other in any situation. This experience has made their marriage stronger and given them the confidence that they can overcome any challenges that come their way. Now they both felt that they could truly enjoy their lives together, because they had learned to appreciate the moments they spent together and to support each other in any circumstances. Their new chapter was the beginning of a more mature, conscious and harmonious relationship where each of them could be themselves and at the same time feel loved and supported.